Hey guys, what's up? Pastor Tanner here. It is Saturday. Pretty close to starting on time. A tad late just because I was sorting out my multi-stream. I didn't want to stream a mixer for some reason, but I think I got it going now. And got some music. And I'm hoping to finish off this sermon today. Hoping it'll work. Test the chat, make sure all the connections are clean. Yep, connections look good. Just gonna listen to the audio mix real quick. Talking while there's music playing, talking while there's music playing. Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Just gonna listen to the audio mix real quick. Talking while there's music playing, talking while there's music playing. I sound really quiet, so I'm glad I did that test. Let me bump this mic up a little bit. And hopefully that gets a little better mix going on. And let me just double check my settings. Yeah, I think I'm good. Just a little closer. And then hopefully you guys can hear a decent mix out there. Let me know if the mix isn't any good, and I'll try to adjust it. But like I said, I'm going to try and finish the sermon today. Pretty much have to, right? Because preaching it tomorrow. So that's the direction I'm going. I'd finished all of the intro, preliminary stuff I wanted to say on the Nephilim and all the stuff on Babel. And now the question was where to take Mark 5 and how to tie in the concepts that I've been talking about. I know I want to end or cap off with a call to action, talking about the gates of hell will not prevail against Christ's church. And the point with that, the purpose with that, was to show that we're on the offensive. It's the gates that are being assaulted. And so I just want to make sure that I have a good understanding of that, and I'm pushing for a good direction on that. Hold on, I'm getting a phone call. And I'll call them back after the stream. Alright, I'm going to check the audio one more time, just to see how things are going. Yeah, I don't know why I'm so quiet. I need to sort that out. Checking the audio again. Back after the stream. Alright, I'm going to check the audio one more time, just to see how things are going. Yeah, I am like dead quiet. Do not know why. Give me 1 second, guys. Hello? Hey, what's up? Sorry about that, guys. Now let's see. I need, again, to make sure this audio is going okay. I don't know why it would be so quiet. So I'm just talking to try and hear how the audio is. And I'll grab it right quick on the delay. See how it sounds. I can still see the delay up there. Give me 1 second, guys. I'll tell you what, getting all the settings right on this every time is not easy. It's not the easiest. Alright, let me check this audio real quick, guys. 1 second. Sorry about that, guys. Now let's see. I need, again, to make sure this audio is going okay. And then let me check this out with the music going. See if that sounds good. See if it sounds good with the music. I swear I did not change the settings on this thing, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, you guys let me know how that sounds. Let me know if it's horrible, if you need me to turn up my mic a little bit more or something like that, but I think I'm mostly going to settle on this for right now. Again, give me 1 second while I test. And to make sure this audio is going okay. And then let me check this out with the music. Yeah, I sound pretty quiet, but maybe it sounds better to you guys. Alright, so today what we need to do is get into the text proper of Mark 5, 1 to 20, and I need to work through some ideas surrounding Mark 5, and then I need to jump right in to putting the rest of this sermon together. So that's the plan for today. And hopefully we'll be able to finish this thing off today. I don't see any reason we shouldn't. So that's how we're going. And I'm going to start this off by just doing a passage guide. Search. Boom, passage guide search. Mark 5, 1 to 20. And I'm just going to read some commentaries, hopefully get some ideas. It's actually nice because I've been preaching topically for the last 2 weeks, and so I haven't read many commentaries because I've just been reading topically about the subject that I'm preaching on. But it's going to be nice now I'm actually preaching a passage formally, and I can get into the commentaries associated with it. So that's the direction I'm going today. So let's see, I want commentaries. Any journals? Here's a journal article directly on my topic. The problem of the grazing herd of pigs. That's a good one. Let's look for more. Transformative discourse in Mark's Gospel with special reference to Mark 5, 1 to 20. We can put both those in there. So check those out. Any good parallel passages or cross-references? I mean, all the cross-references are talking about essentially the same topic. So, I don't think I'm super strong on those. What about the important passages? Again, just cross-references and things like that. A legion. Evil spirits who possessed a man of the Gerasenes. My name is Legion. There's a crazed man by James Tissot, 1886. I'm gonna close that because, you know, it's not appropriate content for all audiences. And man, Logos locking up. I'm not liking it. There we go. So I don't need any media. Events, outlines. So let's start with this Ashland article. Russell Morton, almost 30 years ago, I was a doctoral student in class on miracle stories, and we were examining Mark 5. When sharing our translations, I was asked to read 5:11. And there was along the mountain a great herd of pigs grazing. My translation, it suddenly struck me as a bizarre statement, so I asked, do pigs graze? The reaction of the class was a moment of confusion, and someone mentioned, it does look like they are being treated like a herd of sheep. Could this story have arisen only in a Jewish source, unfamiliar with the husbandry of pigs? There are two basic problems with the account of the pigs. First is the description of the pigs' feeding habits. Are they in fact grazing? Second, why were they described contrary to all that is known about swine as a herd? Interesting. Let's see how long this article is. Well, it's short. Let's read this whole thing. This sounds like the sort of article that is interesting to read, but will provide almost no fodder for the biblical preaching of it, but I'm still going to check it out. Most modern translations say they are feeding, while technically correct. The Greek, boskein, often means to feed on herbage, graze, or feed. It's used in this way in Isaiah 5:17, 11:7. The term bears similar meaning in classical text. In the passive, it means either to graze like cattle or to feed, thus, while possibly referring to feeding behavior in general, more specifically refers to herbivores. This observation leads to the further question, is this an appropriate way to describe pigs? Pigs are not strictly herbivores, but omnivores. They root, don't graze. At no time does Aristotle describe pigs' activity as boskein, to graze. Rather, he uses more technical terms such as living on fruit. Well, I mean, we can search out this answer for ourselves. We don't need this guy's. We don't need to take his word for it. Let's go basic, all texts, in all resources. And let's go Greek, boskein. I want the lemma. Let's just do this. Large herd of pigs was feeding. Bosco. So we'll just grab the lemma here. And we can search all resources for it. And then we'll just make a quick adjustment. And let's close some of these things. That may make this thing run a little more quickly. So search for feeding and search for pigs. All resources. And let's just grab the pigs one. Near. So I'm getting a lot of biblical references, which obviously makes sense. But do we have anything else? Here in Barlam and Eosoph by John Damascene, he uses the two together. Do we have the English of this? Ooh. Turn visual filters off. Getting crazy up in here. I mean, that seems to be pretty clear to me. Let's look for some more. We'll start Bibles. Yeah, it's almost all Bibles, which is fine. Although this is interesting. Let's check my library for John Damascus. And this is what? This is the Greek. I want the English version of this. Barlam. Did I spell that right? Let's try. There we go. Here's the English. This is in section 11. Problem is the sections are fairly long and not well numbered. No, it's a few paragraphs up from section 12. So it should be right in here somewhere. Boom, right there. When after came to perceive his shameful plight and bemoaning himself, said, "How many hired servants my fathers?" Yeah. I think that's it. What's our goose? Farm estate. Yeah, so he's recounting. Here, St. John of Damascus is recounting the parable of the prodigal son, and he uses the same language here, Boscain, Koirus. Even though I think in the biblical text they probably don't use that phrase. Let's look. Yeah, see, in the actual biblical text they don't use that phrase, but when he writes it, he uses that phrase. That tells me that at least the statement that they never do this is a little overstated. Aristotle, for example. Aristotle never uses this language. Well, fine, but others do. John of Damascus does. This is we call this in the business getting in the weeds. I'm very, very deep in the weeds right now. Let's read the rest of this article and see what he has to say. I don't think it's going to be compelling. Okay, he says the grazing isn't the most important thing. It's verses 12 and 13. I'm going to check my audio again real quick. Just see how the balance is. Yeah, so he's recounting. Here, St. John of Damascus is recounting. Okay. I feel like it's working. I just need to bring the audio on the music down a little bit more. Which I am fine with. I can do that. Okay, that should be good. That should be a good balance. Cool. Alright, I like where that balances out. Okay. Herd of pigs instead of cattle and oxen. Two arguments may be made against this view, blah blah blah. Okay, so he's saying that it's likely an exorcism story that we should believe because the pigs act in such an unpig-like manner. Okay. In conclusion, while our analysis of the description of the feeding of habits of pigs is somewhat inconclusive, the discussion of the stampede of the pigs demonstrates nothing less than that when the swine became possessed by demonic spirits, they were caused to act in a manner utterly contrary to normal porcine behavior. In the former case, either Mark or the pre-Markan tradition employs common language, possibly being unfamiliar with the more precise language of animal husbandry. As it applies to pigs, the latter incident accentuates the magnitude of the exorcism. In both cases, the wording is at home in the literary setting of the story. While it is not possible to prove the incident took place, the language is consistent and powerful. It is precisely because the fact that the pigs stampede, totally contrary to their expected behavior, that the reader here of the first century encounters in the narrative the power of Jesus. He expels the demons with a word, which is evidenced by a mighty accompanying sign. Readers can do nothing else but wonder in awe and amazement at the power of this one whom Mark presents as the Son of God. Yeah, interesting ideas, too deep in the weeds, and it'll require too much proof from the pulpit to try and support those ideas. Which brings us to Tyndale Bulletin, Volume 20. Transformative Discourse in Mark's Gospel with special reference to Mark 5:1-20. Okay, he's reviewing the book. You can't get too much in the weeds on some of these articles. Oh, this is a short one. Never mind, we can jump in. Let's see, what is this? Is it a book review? No, it doesn't look like a book review. Looks like they're short articles. That's cool. The study investigates Mark's Gospel as a witness to early Christian theological anthropology, reads the text as an example of transformative discourse, in which the rhetoric of the Gospel works in synergy with its anthropology. The theological anthropology is implicit but recoverable, the dynamic in that it is oriented towards change. Mark communicates with his audience in ways that challenge them and lead them towards transformation. The story of the man with the legion of demons functions within the discourse, primarily as most dramatic example. Ooh, there's going to be a contrast in the narrative between pigs, which Jews saw as ritually unclean, pigs, unclean, and deliverance, which is good, right? So, like, Jews would be reading the story and be like, these dirty Gentiles. And Jesus goes and delivers them anyway, right? And so that's going to be a challenge for us. What sorts of things do we think are unclean? What sorts of people do we find to be unclean? And how can we reach out to them? Chapter 1 argues the strong element of Mark's purpose in the transformation of the reader. Transformation of the reader. Chapter 2 deals with the rhetoric. So he's reviewing an entire book. I think this is a book review. Let me see if I have this. Rochester. That's a lot of author Rochester and author Stewart. This, I wonder what are all the hits I'm getting then if there's no author Rochesters in all of these. Oh, Bishop of Rochester. It's a bunch of ancient like texts. Let me just filter this out so I'm not getting my entire library. Well, let's try this. Transformative discourse. Yeah. No, I don't have it. So let's continue. Rhetoric. Rhetoric of proclamation. Composite transformative discourse potentially impacts its audience in a rich variety of ways. Detailed exegesis of Gerasene demoniac story highlights its significant contribution to this transformative discourse. Rhetorically, the story illustrates many of the facets previously mentioned. It is good news. It is emotionally charged. It demonstrates the supreme authority of Jesus and a radical transformation of a demonized man, with whom readers can identify in a variety of ways. Anthropologically, the story visualizes an eschatological turnaround for a humanity suffering under demonic oppression, with liberation into a new future, a life following Jesus. I'll just grab this quote, and then I'm good. I don't need to keep going into that. All right, I think that's good. Good news, emotionally charged, supreme authority of Jesus, eschatological turnaround. This is what I'm emphasizing. This is the big picture of the... This is a big picture. I think this needs to be the last point. Okay, let's read what Heiser has to say, so make sure I get the big picture right. Lest this thought be troubling, seeming as it is out of place with Christian traditions, two things can be said. First, biblical theology must come from the biblical... Okay, I don't care about that. Where is he talking about Mark 5? Right here. In the latter text, the demonic power thwarted by Jesus, in allusion to Mark 5, is identified as one of the giants who died in the internecine conflict. Similarly, in Pseudo-Clementine homilies, refers to the giants which are both bastards and demons in the antediluvian phase of their existence. Here they are said to have survived the deluge in the form of disembodied large souls whose post-diluvian activities are prescribed through certain righteous law given to them through an angel. Furthermore, one may consider Tertullian, in which the offspring of the fallen angels are called a demon brood who inflict upon our bodies diseases and other grievous calamities. The implications of the giant traditions for the concept of demonology have been insufficiently recognized. Cool, not important though. What does he say here? Ultimately, these interpretations miss the cosmic symbolic message of the incident. Immediately before this exorcism, Jesus rebuked the wind and waves. Prior to Mark 5, Jesus had restricted his preaching and miraculous displays of power to a Jewish audience. He was, after all, Israel's Messiah. His focus changes in 5:1 when he deliberately enters the country of the Gerasenes, Gentile territory. Yeah, that's important. Yeah, this has to be last, because I'm going to be given the broad overview of what it means. So, assault. Deliberately enters Gentile Satan's territory. So that's part of the assault that he is leading the charge. He deliberately enters Gentile territory. I can talk about its pigs and all that type of stuff. Previously, was he only Jewish audiences for the most part? Yeah, he's got these parables. People don't understand. Kingdom of God. So this is fresh, the idea that he's entering Gentile territory, something new that he's doing. Mark's report of Legion's questions, "What have you to do with me?" creates a connection between Jesus' entrance into Gentile land and his earlier ministry to the Jews. So if I'm going to prove this, I need a couple more points. Verse 7, "What do you want to do with me?" That'll be over here. Verse 7. And verse 1. Verse 1, verse 11. These are all proofs that he's in Gentile Satan territory. Verse 11. Verse 1. Okay, all of these kind of prove that point. Jesus cast... Legion's question echoes the cries of the unclean spirits Jesus cast out in Mark 1:24 when he was in the Jewish region. But there's a subtle difference. Jesus of Nazareth versus Jesus, Son of the Most High. Yeah, that's too deep. I'm not going to be able to tie it to Deuteronomy 32, Psalm 82, all that type of stuff. But this is important. We have a strong theological message. The Messiah, the Son of God, is not only here to redeem Israel. He's here to begin repossessing the Gentile nations as his own, reclaiming the nations who require the defeat of the powers of darkness. Jesus' exorcism of Legion begins that campaign, something he'll complete when he returns. I like this quote. Quote 4. Quote 4. My Kaiser on Mark 5. Lets me know that I'm still here. Nice. So that's the big picture we're driving at. Let me put up here quote 4 so I don't forget. Quote 4. Okay, I like the direction all this is going. Let's see what else he has to say. This last piece. This description means another familiar episode in Jesus' ministry occurred within the territory of Bashan. Prior to Mark 5, as Israel's Messiah, Jesus had restricted his ministry to a Jewish audience. His focus changed in Mark 5 when he intentionally entered the country of the Gerasenes. Mark's wording is interesting. When Legion asks, "What have you to do with me?" the question echoes that of the unclean spirits cast out in Mark 1 within the Jewish territory, with a subtle difference. Jesus of Nazareth versus Son of the Most High God reflects cosmic geography. Same thing. The exorcism of Legion is more than a strange tale of suicidal swine. It's about theological messaging. Legion recognizes Jesus is rightful Lord of the country of the Gerasenes, under Old Bashan, now under Gentile occupation. These familiar episodes in the ministry of Jesus occur in the darkest, most spiritually sinister places known in the Old Testament Israelites. Bashan and Hermon were ground zero for spiritual evil, in particular the Watchers of First Enoch. The spiritual corruption of humanity would be healed by the atonement of the cross. His resurrection meant that no member of the kingdom of God would share living space with the Watchers in the underworld abyss, the realm of the dead. Even an army of Watchers was overmatched by the Son of the Most High. They would be lords of nothing. So, do I want to tie in that? Do I want to tie in the fact that the physical location is important? I don't have time to go into the Bashan stuff and all of that. I think, as interesting as that is, man, could I say something about the region, or... I mean, I'm talking about deliberately entering Gentile Satan's territory. I could make a reference to, there's some indication that in the Old Testament, this is a similar physical location, Bashan. Scholars have noted the ancient boundaries of Bashan, although impossible to determine exactly, appear to be in an area north of Gilead, west of Selakah, and Jebel Druze Mountains, south of Mount Hermon. Yeah, I just don't think I have time to go into Bashan. The point's already made. It's more interesting and clear with Bashan, but no. Point's already made. Okay, done with that. Done with this. Let's read some standard commentaries on the text, now that we've read all sorts of crazy stuff. What does Jerome have to say? And also, why is Jerome being prioritized like that? Because I have this Fathers of the Church series before all my commentaries. Alright, I'm fine with it. I think I was treating the Fathers of the Church like a dictionary or something like that. Anyway, I'm not upset about it. Let's see what he has to say. This is on a completely different passage. I'm sure he references 1 to 20. Yeah. Not interested. Pillar. Jesus has just calmed a violent storm at the sea. He now meets a man with an equally violent storm inside of him. In both cases, the power of Jesus prevails over chaos and destruction. The purpose of the healing of the Gerasene demoniac, as with the stilling of the storm in the lake, is not simply to leave readers awestruck, however, but to prompt them to consider how much the Lord has done for you, how he has had mercy on you. Once again, Jesus is connoted with God, for the Lord who has healed the demoniac is none other than Jesus. So he's tying in my statement here of disciple making. Now, how do I want this to flow? I think these are going to be the two big ideas. Assault and disciple making. These are going to be the two big ideas. And you know what? I've already spent a lot of time, so maybe I don't have to go into a lot of this stuff. Let's keep reading the commentaries and see what they say. Here's that whole Gerasene questioning. I mean, it's great that scholars are digging into this, but I don't care about it that much. The Gerasa of Mark V was probably Gergesa. Law. Again, it's the region. It's roughly the same area. It's not the big deal. Healing of the Gerasene demoniac is Mark's third and most graphic exorcism so far. Again, he ties it to the boat on the lake. From a Jewish perspective, the story is replete with elements of uncleanness. Gentile region, Decapolis. He's in a... I didn't even think of that. He's in a graveyard. Tombs. Which... Pigs are ritually unclean. Gentile areas are ritually unclean. And the fact that he's in a graveyard is ritually unclean. So we have two lessons to learn from the fact that he's in an unclean territory. First, it's that Jesus is assaulting the Gentile territory and stealing Satan's dominion. But the second half is that this needs to change the Jewish conception that God, has a problem with these things. Jesus has no problem marching right into this and becoming ritually unclean. Dead and defiled. Swine herders. Unclean spirit, unclean tombs, unclean occupations, unclean Gentiles. Nice. Mark's narrative framework implies the demonic powers are intent on prohibiting Jesus from entering the region. First, the demonic nature of the storm on the lake nearly capsizes the boat. Now a demon-possessed man, powerful enough to break the irons, hurls himself at Jesus and the disciples. This is a place no one would go for any reason. Contrary to all reason and expectation, Jesus goes there. Most important is the reference to Jesus as Son of the Most High God, epithet emphasizing the transcendence and exaltation of Israel's God over pagan gods. Ooh, see, that's more relevant than the whole Bashan argument that Heiser made. This is easier to teach. Most High God is relevant. Typical of Gentile polytheism, designating Jesus as the Son of the one true God, transcendent over all others, Son of the Most High God, establishes the uniqueness of Jesus' position in relation to God Almighty and the universality of his power. The unclean spirit is expelled from the demon-possessed man solely by the authority of the word of Jesus. With Jesus, there's no elaborate protocol to expel demons. Power to prevail over demonic resides in Jesus himself. He speaks and the demons are expelled. His word is deed. As to who he is, legion, we are many. The demoniac is not a split personality, but a multiple or shattered personality equal to the number and force of the Roman legion occupying him. The plea of the demons not to be sent from the area. Legion is militant. That's important as well. At any rate, it is further clue that Decapolis is dominated by demonic forces of darkness hostile to the arrival of Jesus. And then it's the pig thing. And I think everything I read thus far, like, I don't need to read about verses 1 through 10 in any of the other commentaries because I got everything I need for that. But I want to keep reading about the pig part that's weird until I get an answer that makes sense. The destruction of the pigs plagues or embarrasses many modern interpreters. Some dismiss it. The greatest dilemma posed by this stampede is, in my judgment, the moral question. 2,000 pigs represent an enormous livelihood. Hey, Kevin. Kevin jumps in on Twitch. Pastor Tanner, how's it going, man? I'm doing really well, Kevin. How are you doing? Did you have a good week? 2,000 pigs represents an enormous livelihood and their loss an economic catastrophe. The good done to the demoniac results in a great misfortune for the swineherds. Ironically, both Jesus and Mark pass over the obvious plight of the swineherds without comment. As it stands, the story directs undivided attention to the rescue of one man from a tragic and torturous fate. Here, perhaps, is the essential moral of the miracle, surpassing even the dilemma of the loss of pigs. In the eyes of Jesus, the rescue and restoration of one person is more important than vast capital assets. Compared to the redemption of a human being, the loss of swineherds, considerable though it is, does not rate mentioning. And that's where I got on here, the emphasis of priorities, right? I think I can eliminate this interactions with demons point because I'm going to be talking about his interactions in several other parts. So that won't be a main point I go to. So I will talk about priorities first, and I can talk about spiritual priorities take precedence over physical priorities for Jesus. And so I can emphasize that because I have this relationship. Then I can talk about disciple making as a priority. And finally I can talk about the assault that Jesus is making. And I think that is plenty. Kevin asks, I did thank you. Got lots of hours with my clients, so that will help for the big move to my new apartment. How was yours? That's awesome, Kevin. I'm glad to hear that. My week was good. We had VBS all week, and we just wrapped that up last night. And there were lots of kids and people there. They put me in a dunk tank. The kids were playing all week for points on whether or not they could get a chance to throw a ball to dunk me. And I got put in the dunk tank, and I got dunked, 20 times by all those kids. They had a blast doing that. And then I talked to many new families. The cool thing about VBS is we get people who we don't typically get. And so it was nice to interact with some new people, some new families, and hopefully get some new people show up on Sunday based on some of our interactions. Regardless, it was fun. It was a good week. Very busy, though, and just wrapping up this sermon for tomorrow. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing. Thanks for asking, Kevin. Appreciate it. So I think that's where I'll go. I'll go priorities. I'll go disciple making. And then I can go with the all-out assault. Yeah, I like that. I think that structure will go well. Physical plus spiritual intertwined. And so, given the relationship of the physical and spiritual realm, what posture should Christians take towards it? First, we need to have our priorities straight. We can see in the fact that the pigs run down the hill, and Mark nor Jesus really care about it at all. So that's a good one. So which verses are those? (11 to 13 and 17). 11 to 13 and 17 are the relevant verses here. Verse 11 to 13 and 17. Nice. Okay, I think that's good. Kevin says, that's great. I did VBS when I was a kid, and it was some of the happier times of my life. Even though I ultimately parted with the theology, the people there and the teaching served as an early foundation for my faith. A bit of an assumption that they didn't care, or is it more a reflection of the lack of care of the culture? Sorry, I can't help myself. Let's see. I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Even though I ultimately parted with the theology, the people there and the teachings served as an early foundation for my faith. A bit of an assumption that they didn't care, or is it more a reflection of the lack of care of the culture? Oh, I see. You're commenting on the discussion of the pigs. I thought you were talking about VBS. Got you. That makes more sense, Kevin. Yeah. They sure don't look like they care, right? The pigs run into the sea, are drowned, and then the people ask Jesus to leave. And yeah, they don't look like they care at all. That's what this commentator says. The greatest dilemma posed by the stampede of swine, in my judgment, is the moral question. 2,000 pigs represent an enormous livelihood, and their loss an economic catastrophe. The good done to the demoniac results in the great misfortune of the swineherds. Ironically, both Jesus and Mark pass over the obvious plight of the swineherds without comment. As with the story of God's commandment to Abraham to sacrifice Isaac on Mount Moriah, Soren Kierkegaard may have counted this incident as an example of teleological suspension of the ethical, an instance where an ultimate good or command of God overrides all other goods. Yeah, it's interesting, and it's certainly a strong point in the text, for sure. Kevin continues, I can serve as the atheist in your pulpit to make your sermon watertight. Well, I appreciate that, Kevin. Yeah. No, and yeah, VBS was good. I never did VBS as a kid at all. I've never done that once, but it was very popular and important in our church, and so we just kind of latched onto it, and yeah, people seem to really enjoy it, and I enjoyed meeting new people, so it's been good. Sorry I was confused there, Kevin. I appreciate your clarification. Alright, verses 14 to 17. The remainder of the story centers on the reaction of the locals. The swineherds reported that in the town and countryside, the nearest town was Kursi or Gergesa, but also the region was Hippos, a citadel city in the Decapolis. The report summons people from the surrounding area to see what has happened, and they see something quite astounding. The infamous demoniac, in a wholly altered state, sitting there dressed and in his right mind. That is a picture of discipleship and salvation, a restored individual sitting at the feet of Jesus. The corollaries of the healing of the demoniac with the stilling of the storm are now wholly apparent. Both stories end in fear. At the crossing of the lake, the disciples were more terrified at Jesus' power to still the storm than at the storm itself. Further, like the disciples, the townspeople witness a stupendous miracle, but it does not lead to faith, at least not yet. Most people, if asked, would like to see a manifestation of God, but this story is a cold shower for religious pipe dreams. When God manifests himself in Jesus, most people ask him to leave. Finally, there is a clear parallel in the outcomes of both stories. The composure of the healed demoniac, dressed and in his right mind, is a counterpart to the great calm of the lake after the storm. Both outer and inner storms have been quelled by the authority of Jesus. Jesus brings creation out of chaos. 18 to 20, the story concludes with the former demoniac asking to be with him. The request is worded in the vocabulary of discipleship in 3:14. Indicating his wish to join Jesus. Jesus forbids him, probably because the Gentile would have been a stumbling block to his mission in Israel. The mission and call of Jesus are owing to his will alone. Curiously, however, Jesus does not swear the man to silence, as he had been up until now. Ooh, that's very interesting. Previously, when Jesus cast out demons, he swore everyone to silence. He doesn't do it here. He does the opposite. The assault has begun. Very, very interesting idea. Not sworn to silence. Yeah, that has a lot of theological significance. Human response alone, even hardness of heart, is not the final word. Go home to your family, tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has mercy on you. Their banishment of Jesus does not rid them of Jesus, for Jesus is present in the message of the gospel proclaimed to his followers. In the concluding verses of the story, Mark leaves us with another clue to Jesus' divine status. Tell them how much the Lord has done for you. The man then went out and told how much Jesus had done for him. For this man, the Lord and Jesus are one and the same. In the Gospel of Mark, the healed demoniac becomes the first missionary preacher sent out by Jesus. Remarkably, he is a Gentile sent to Gentiles. Really cool. Nice. Lord equals Jesus. Kevin says, so is your intermediate, is that the right word, family still committed to Mormonism? So is your intermediate, is that the right word, family still committed to Mormonism? I don't think we would typically use the word intermediate. I would say maybe extended family. My mom's side of the family is Mormon, but she doesn't practice, and it's only it's only my uncle and my cousins that are really strong in that. And so I wouldn't say they're committed. And then my father is, I think, an atheist or an agnostic, something in that range. So I don't think they're really committed to the idea. I was baptized Mormon when I was young. I was a first child, so I think they were trying to do what parents should do in instilling some sort of moral principles or ideas in their child, but they weren't ever really, really strong into it. And when I asked to stop going when I was young, they said, yeah, that's fine, you don't have to go. A cold shower to religious pipe dreams. I like that. Who wrote that? The author of this commentary, the Pillar New Testament commentary, is James Edwards. I've been utilizing him a lot as I preach through the book of Mark. His commentary is excellent, and I enjoy it a lot. So, yeah, James Edwards, Pillar New Testament commentary on the book of Mark. What scripture is this? I am preaching out of Mark 5, 1 to 20. Mark 5, 1 to 20. You can see all of it right here. Jesus restores a demon-possessed man, and he goes across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. The man's out of his mind. He runs up and approaches Jesus, and the demons start talking to him. And then Jesus casts the demons out and sends them into the pigs. They run down or drown in the sea. The town comes and they're mad at Jesus and they ask him to leave, and he leaves. And the demoniac tries to come with him now that he's been saved, and Jesus instead sends him home on mission to tell his family and friends. That's essentially the summary. Mark 5, 1 to 20. And it's also in Matthew and Luke, so you can catch it in both of those as well. Kevin, at the ripe age of 8, I'm guessing. Yeah, I believe that's when they had me baptized, at 8. And then I probably was 9 when I said, I don't want to do this anymore, and they were okay with it. So, yeah, it is what it is. It's an interesting thing. I had somebody on the stream asking yesterday about Mormonism. It was Bloodbound. And I pulled out my old book titled Achieving a Celestial Marriage. I don't know if that comes through clearly, but this is put out by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and Chapter 1 talks explicitly how you can become a god, right? And really goes into it, so you can catch that VOD if you're interested in looking into that topic, but we discussed that at length yesterday. Very interesting religion, and I'm not convinced by it, but it is what it is. Oops, the internet cut out. Sorry, what scripture? Mark 5, 1 to 20. Mark 5, 1 to 20 is where I'm at. And again, it's also in... Let me just give you the parallel passages. The Gerasene demoniac is Mark 5, 1 to 20. It's Matthew 28 to 34. And it's Matthew 8, 28 to 34. And it's Luke 8, 26 to 39. All of those are the story of the Gerasene demoniac. So it's in all three of the, what do they call them? All three of the, I forget, there's a certain type of synoptic. All three of the synoptic gospels talk about this incident. No problem, Kevin. Alright, I'm getting a feel for what I want to speak on. So the first thing I want to talk on is priorities. And so I'm going to talk about the fact that Jesus and Mark Mark's priorities, there's a clash between the physical and spiritual realm in this incident, and the spiritual realm is so important that Jesus and Mark don't even mention the physical realm. And so that's the first thing I want to talk about. And I can give it plenty of examples, probably, of examples where we allow the physical realm to consume our minds, when in reality the spiritual realm is more important. So I'm trying to think. Maybe a sick loved one? If we have a sick loved one in our life, we tend to get everyone together when they have a physical illness, but we rarely try to make time or opportunity to talk about their spiritual state. That might be appropriate to talk about. The other thing on priorities is judgmentalism, because the text is all about taking the gospel to Gentiles, and Jews would not like that. And so the fact that they're in the graveyards, the tombs are unclean, they're in Gentile territory, pigs are unclean, all these different things are unclean, and yet Jesus is happy to go do ministry there. In fact, he goes out of his way to go there. And so, who are the Gentiles? We're Gentiles, right? But who are our equivalent of Gentiles in our day and age? People like drug addicts, alcoholics, homeless people, the outcasts of society. We might be against administering to, but those are the people that Jesus goes out of his way to administer to here in this text. So it's not a profound statement, it's fairly biblical, consistent, but it's an important point, I think, that is relevant. So I can talk about pigs, Gentile territory, and so let me think. I need to put an application in here. This sick loved one should go in purple because it's an illustration. And then I need to apply that concept in pink. And just ask, where do your priorities lie? One more I. There we go. And there's going to be two levels here of this. First, we have the physical realm and the spiritual realm. And Jesus indicates that the spiritual realm is more important than the physical realm. But amidst the spiritual realm, we also have individual spiritual realm and then the big picture warfare spiritual realm. And in that case, the big picture is also more important to Jesus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this same application up here, but I'm going to compare it to big picture. Here I'm saying this about an individual, small picture. But once I get into the assault, point 3, I want to emphasize the big picture as well. And this will give me the opportunity to do that. And so this is going to be who are the irredeemables in our day. Because those are the people we should go out and help. Now, how do we best help them? Through disciple making. That's what Jesus emphasizes. Kevin says, I would be careful if potentially gross categorizing drug addicts and alcoholics in a sermon to over 100 people, as many upsetting and frankly amazing people externally to others' eyes are struggling with addiction. Also, many who fall to mental illness and homeless were often just one step away from normalcy before the addiction happened, just to avoid alienating people in an audience who may or may not have a loved one. By that I mean categorizing as a simple irredeemable people in the people's eyes. Yeah, I need to be careful. I appreciate that, Kevin. But the language I use, my point is to actually support what you're trying to say, right? Hey, who are the people you think of as the Jews would think of Gentiles, right? The Jews, if you go to Gerasene, the Jews would think these people are completely religiously unclean. They have, this man wanders in a graveyard, a place of uncleanness. Their economy is pigs, which are an unclean animal. They're Gentiles, which makes them unclean. So the Jews' gut reaction would be to not help these people at all and stay away from them. What is the equivalent of that to us today? And this might be I think your point is well taken. This might be different for everyone. And so maybe instead of naming specific groups, maybe I say something like, think in your mind, who's the grossest type of person you could ever imagine. Picture that in your mind's eye. Who's the person that you would hate to interact with? That is the person that Jesus is going out of his way to help in this picture. Who are those people you would be most loath to help? That might be it. And then I don't even have to name specifics. That might be good. What do you think of that, Kevin? Does that get at the same idea and without being as charged language, without being something that would trigger somebody in that way? Let me know what you think. I appreciate that feedback. Now, what is the main way we help them? We help them through disciple making. So get some red arrows in here. Kevin follows up, I can see that you are for sure, but just be careful how it's said so that they don't think you're inadvertently feeding a stigma. Maybe my advice is to input in there that you yourself don't generalize that way. Distance yourself even them from unfair stigmas, but also there isn't anything wrong with being real with abrasive human qualities. To answer you, you can address these topics of addiction, just make sure to include that this is a stigma and you're not categorizing anyone addicted to drugs or even homeless as such. Yeah, that's good, that's helpful. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that. Maybe I'll just put stigmas of bad people. Who would you stigmatize as a bad person? Those are the people Jesus goes to help. Because the Jews saw Gentiles as bad people. Nice. Thanks, Kevin. Alright. Now, point number 2 of this sucker is disciple making. And that's what Jesus is all about here. So, I can see that clearly in verses 15. 15 is a good picture of that. And then (18 to 20). 15 and 18 to 20. Yeah, one thing I don't do well, Kevin, I'm an engineer by trade. I know I'm a pastor, but I also am a full-time engineer. And I think about things in a very, I don't know if logical is the right way to put it, but very fact-oriented manner. And sometimes I miss the fact that my language can be emotionally charged to people, because that language doesn't carry the same emotional weight for me. So it's an interesting aspect of my personality that I have to be aware of. Kevin says, again, I can hear your heart, but others sensitive to that may hear a judgment. Right on, dude. Now a tougher question. Sin being how it is, pride supposedly being one of the worst, how do we truly differentiate a bad person from a good person in the way you're alluding to? Yeah, I think that what you're saying is that if sin is internal, or one of the worst types of sin is internal, then how are you saying this person's bad, this person's good? And I actually think that's one of the misnomers in society, one of the primary misnomers. Look at Genesis 3 and the fall, and you can see the thing that is going on is God is upset that Satan goes with his own plan. The serpent deceived me and I ate, so the Lord said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you, I will put enmity, all these things. God's most upset with the fact that people didn't follow his plan. I think that's, the heart of sin is, it's an internal state of not following God's plan, but following my plan or somebody else's plan. Now that manifests itself outwardly in sins, right? So, but I believe those things are much like the symptom of a disease. So let's say you have a disease, and this disease is called sin, okay? One of the symptoms of that disease is that you're going to do bad things, okay? I'm not interested in treating symptoms, right? And I don't think God is either, really. I don't think he so much cares about just these outward acts. And in Christianity, we always emphasize that stuff. You did a bad thing, you did a sin, you're a sinner, right? And it's like, no, you're not a sinner because you did a bad thing. You're inherently a sinner, and that's why you did a bad thing. And I don't really care about the bad thing so much as the state of your heart or soul itself. And I think that's God's emphasis too. I don't think I'm off base with that biblically. So what you said is 100% correct. Sin is more internal than it is external. So how do you differentiate between the good people and the bad people? I think the difference is maybe not even what they do externally so much as their internal state. Now, how do you determine their internal state? You can't. I can't see into somebody's heart, but God can, right? I would ultimately say, moving this direction with it, that good people, the way you want to put it, are people who are on God's team. And bad people, if you want to put it that way, are people who aren't on God's team. And the people who are the good people might externally even do worse things than the people who are the bad people. They might externally, do better things. Because it's not so much about external actions in terms of the symptoms of the problem as it is your internal heart. Now, if you have internally been changed to a good person, i.e. you're on God's team, then you ought to act externally in line with that truth. And if you are internally a bad person or not on God's team, you ought to act externally in consonant with that truth. But I'm not saying people are 100% consistent on this one way or the other. That's, I don't know, some broad ramblings of the topic, but I do think the heart of your question is correct. Why do we emphasize and criticize people for these external actions that they take when it's the internal that matters? And I agree with you. We need to focus on the internal more with people and helping them sort through this so that they can live in light of who they actually are. That's broadly how I would think about it. Pride supposedly being the worst, how do we differentiate from a bad from a good person? Yeah, I think I answered that the best I could. Kevin continues, just when I was talking about how I'm a fact-oriented person, he says, you are like a Vulcan Spock and you need a little McCoy once in a while. I do not know much about Star Trek, but I know enough to know that people have described me as a Spock before, a Vulcan. So, yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, Kevin. That's funny. Kevin says, cool answer. Now, if only it was more clear as to who is on God's team without getting caught up in the different views, even in the supposed fundamental truths. Hey, I agree with you, Kevin. I actually agree with you 100% on that. I try to draw the circle very, very small. And so, if this were the circle of, like, who's on God's team, right? I mean, I am pretty broad on who I'm willing to include in this. Like, there's a few, you got to get your doctrine of God correct, because that's essential to being on his team. You have to understand who he is, right? You probably also need to get your doctrine of salvation correct. Jesus says salvation is in his name and no others, for only through the name of Jesus shall we be saved. And I am kind of unwilling to add to these two. I'm trying to think of if there's other doctrines that I would say you are required to get right in order to be on God's team. If you're going to be on God's team, you have to know who God is and understand him correctly, and you have to know his plan. And his plan is partially that salvific idea, right? And then from there, I think you have everything you need to be on God's team. You know God, and you know his plan for salvation. And I guess maybe there's a third that you want to live in light of these. You may know both of these things very well, but you don't want to live in light of it, so act, I'll put consonantly with these truths. And I think that's as small as I'm willing to make the circle. I think something like that. These three ideas. Act in accordance with these two truths, know these two truths, and that's about as small as I'm willing to make the circle. I don't think I could exclude any of these and feel comfortable. And I also am not willing to go, oh, you have to believe in my understanding of eschatology, right, in order to be on God's team, and all this other stuff. A lot of people make the circle, really, really, I guess, small in that sense, and I would put this outside the circle. That's not important. Well, it's important, but it's not required. So that's kind of how I would understand it, I think. Kevin says, I always like C.S. Lewis' idea of mere Christianity that he unpacks in the book's intro. If I need to know who God is and understand him directly, I would probably say I fail in that aspect. And on that note, of the truly essential. How does the Down syndrome man with limited mental capacity know and understand God in the way you mean? You bring up a good point, Kevin, and this is another aspect that I think is important. I think we too often make Christianity an intellectual endeavor, right? What do we talk about? Believe in Jesus, believe in God, know the gospel. We make Christianity a mental exercise almost, right? Like, if you know and believe these truths, then you're a Christian, and if you don't know and believe these truths, then you're not a Christian. And I think there's something very, very wrong with that. So, when I say God and salvation, or God and his plan, are essential aspects, you could probably subdivide these even, right? Like, oh, what are the details of salvation? Is it salvation by grace through faith alone? What about, the details of God? Is he triune? All these different things. And that's where, to be honest, I'm a little more hesitant, because I do not think God intends for Christianity to be primarily an intellectual endeavor. There are certain propositional truths that we need to believe and understand. Don't get me wrong. But I don't think Christianity is primarily meant to be an intellectual endeavor. I just don't. And frankly, if somebody is incapable mentally of grasping propositions such as these, I am confident that God is sovereign, right, and good, and he's going to do the right thing. And so I'm not going to judge that or pretend to have any knowledge or understanding of that. So that's kind of how I would view that, I think. And so yeah, if someone was to come to me and say, so you're saying if, like, let's go with a Down syndrome person, okay? And let's say we were just hell-bent on getting them saved in Christian terms. And we had defined saved as these three things, right? And I'm sitting down and trying to describe the plan of salvation to them, and they don't seem to be grasping it. I am not going to be sitting there fretting, because if they don't grasp this propositional truth, if they don't get this intellectual concept, then they're going to hell. Oh no, I've got to get them to get this. No. I don't think God works that way. I don't think that's his purpose and intention, and I don't think that's why he gives us these truths, so that we can fret over whether people are getting all of the details right. Christianity is not primarily an intellectual endeavor. And so, in that case, I would try to explain this concept to them, and if they weren't getting it, I would trust that God is good, and he's going to do what's right. So, that's how I stand with those things. Maybe it doesn't sound orthodox, I don't know, but I think that's biblical in terms of how God is and how he interacts with his people. Kevin says, exactly, these are the things I got baffled with. Yeah, Kevin, I just don't think the Bible teaches it. I have interacted with a lot of people who I would describe of a fundamentalist type camp or bent. And I love my brothers and sisters in Christ, but ultimately I think there's far too much emphasis on certain things that I just don't think are biblical, and I don't think it's God's intention to try and, baffle us with. So, and to me, that's where faith comes into play. We talk about faith in like these abstract ideas, like it requires faith. You know what requires faith for me? The idea that, when I get to a point where I'm like, yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, I have faith that God's going to do the right thing. That's where I land, right? I just have faith that God's going to do the right thing. And that's where faith ends up for me. I think the actual intellectual endeavor of believing in Christianity isn't very difficult, at least for me to accept. We talked before about proofs that I have, or proofs that I think about for the existence of God, at least in my mind. I don't struggle with that very much, and that to me doesn't require much faith in my mind. But what requires faith for me is when I get into one of these quandaries or these questions, and I just go, you know what? God's going to do what's right. I'm not going to fret about this. Kevin says, cool, man. Thank you again. I won't take up more of your time to get it done. Oh, no problem, Kevin. I'm going to be streaming for another hour and 20 minutes, and I definitely don't have another hour and 20 minutes worth of content, so please feel free to hop in and ask questions. I spent almost all day yesterday talking to Bloodbound and answering a bunch of questions he had, and so that's why I stream this, is so that I can interact with people. So don't you worry about asking questions at all. I might take a while to get to them. If I'm on a certain train of thought, I might continue my train of thought and work on my sermon, and then I'll pop over and look at the messages again later. So, yeah. Kevin says, cool, maybe I'll come back on again today. All the best, man. Thanks, Kevin. Take care, and I hope you have a good rest of your day today. Bye now. All right, let's continue on point number 2. Disciple making is at the heart of what Jesus is doing there. And let's see. I've got my verses to prove disciple making, and I can just talk about how this is stereotypical disciple in verse 15. At the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and verses 18 to 20, wants to go and be with Jesus, but no, he has a job to do. Ooh, and that has an application to it as well. How often are Christians caught up in some spiritual exercise of just being with Jesus, when in reality Jesus has given us marching orders, right? So I think that's a good point as well. And we want people to have a balance in this. And this is an element of the already and the not yet, really. The kingdom's already here, so we should just rest in Jesus. The kingdom's not yet here, so we need to work. Balance. So actually what I'll do is I'll go here with this. And then down below it I'll put already versus not yet. Do I got another song going, or? Oh, it's just a quiet one. I was gonna say I was digging that music. Didn't know what happened. And so we want to not only be disciples ourselves, but call others to discipleship. It's twofold. Be a disciple. Call others. Both are important. Nice. I like that. And I just thought of something. I'm reminded somewhere in here about the alabaster jar of perfume. So it probably goes somewhere in here. The woman breaks the perfume and spreads it all over Jesus for his burial, and the disciples are like, why didn't you sell this and give the money to the poor? This has to do with priorities. Now, is it a big picture priority? Because I want to put those up here. Yeah, I don't know if it's a big picture priority or a small priority. I think it's a big picture priority. I could put it up here with this. Yeah, I like that. And then assault. And so I can go to each of these verses to talk about the assault that Jesus is making on Gentile territory. Can use quote 4. I think this is going the direction I want. He assaults their territory. These are the examples. Quote 4 from Mike Heiser, the Messiah, the Son of God, is not only here to redeem Israel, he is here to begin repossessing the Gentile nations as his own. Reclaiming the nations will require the defeat of the powers of darkness. Jesus' exorcism of Legion begins that campaign. I like that quote. Most High God is relevant. Which verse is Most High God? So I've got 1, 11, and 7 right now. So that comes off as 7. So it's What Do You Want With Me, and it's Most High God. Both of those are relevant in 7. What do you want? Demons are confused. What are you doing here? Let's see if verse 11 and verse 1 are obvious, or if I need to make some annotations. Region of the Gerasenes, obvious. Large herd of pigs, obvious. So I don't need to make additional annotations there. That's good to go. Good to go on that. What about back to here? So I've got all these descriptions. This becomes an application. We need to take action or assault. It's an application for us. Get rid of this. In the same way Jesus assaults their territory, so too we need to take action and essentially assault their territory. Zimmertrax199 says, at Pastor Tanner, nice stream. Is this a restream? Haha, type Zimmertrax in YouTube. No, this is not a restream, sir. This is live. Yeah, and I'm just going through all this stuff. Hope you're having a good day, and take care. Okay. The fact that he says we're legion harkens back to military conflict, which emphasizes all the more the categories of assault. And then I have my Where Do Your Priorities Lie Part 2. In the first part I asked between physical and spiritual, where do they lie? Now I'm asking, where do your priorities lie? Personal or global, external, right? And so this, I think, goes here. I think it's appropriate to say we need to take action or assault, just like Jesus did, because I've been talking about that the whole time. And then I'll say, where do your priorities lie? Again. But now it's not, there's an extra piece to it. It's not just where do your priorities lie. It's not just where do your priorities lie. Look, you should focus on the spiritual, but now it's where do your priorities lie, big picture or small picture. And we need to gain a bigger picture of our role in this whole conflict. So I'll say first it was physical versus spiritual, but second it's big picture versus small picture. And we need to have a better big picture perspective. Physical versus spiritual. And I said you should have spiritual, so I'm going to underline that. Oops. There we go. And now, big picture versus small picture. Are we worried spiritually about just our little corner of the world, or do we have God's plan in mind? And then I'll have a chance to go into big picture what's going on. God is recapturing the Gentiles for himself. We can be part of that recapturing process. And that's kind of our goal and our purpose, right? The last 3 weeks have been about trying to get people to see the big picture. reminds me of the parable of the alabaster jar of perfume. She had a big picture, and she was being criticized by people who had a small picture. And Jesus corrects them. So now I need to describe the big picture as best I can. What is the big picture? Cosmic war over human history. I think this ends up just being a giant call to missions. Because there's a cosmic war over human history. God breaks in through Jesus and begins a full-out assault. Gentiles were Satan's, now God's. We live in the church age. That is continuing this mission of Jesus of conquering church age, capture the nations and deliver them from false gods. God's intention is to unite the physical and spiritual realm. So our job as the church is to assault The nations are Christ's. Let's go get him for him. So our job as the church is to capture the nations, the Gentiles, for Christ. And everything we do should feed into that, capturing the nations. So we should be praying to that end. We should be pouring our resources financially into that end. We should be pouring our skills and abilities to that end. I kind of want to talk about preparing to rule, but I don't have opportunity to go into that, I think. We must capture the nations for Christ. God confirms the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And we need to deliver people from false gods and false religion. I think those are the two things we need to be doing. Deliver people from false gods. They don't exist anymore. I mean, they do, but they're nothing. It's the one true God that people need to know. I think that summarizes it. So it's a twofold endeavor. These are the marching orders of the church. I think. I think that makes sense. And I just want to make sure I'm not leaving anything out. The problem is I'm not eschatologically tying people's personal, because what was God trying to do from the beginning? Be fruitful and multiply. Human beings are now being fruitful and multiplying, but we're not under the umbrella of God's rule. So we need to continue to be fruitful and multiply. But God has leveraged the nations now. So we want to continue to fulfill, be fruitful, and multiply. Be fruitful and multiply. So that's a piece of it. What's the big picture? First, we needed to be fruitful and multiply, but then there was a cosmic war over human history, where essentially angels and man both tried to accomplish God's plan on their own terms. The Gentiles were handed over to Satan, they belonged to him, and God was going to build his people amongst just Israel. Then, during the church age, Jesus comes and leverages a full frontal spiritual assault on Satan's realm, i.e. the Gentiles. And that assault continues throughout the church age. Capture the nations, This is why Paul wants to go to Spain so badly. To him, that's the end of the world. This is why he wants to travel and go to Spain. He is dead set on capturing the nations. But there are nations today that Paul couldn't even have dreamed of. And so we need to continue in Paul's footsteps and continue to capture the nations. All these nations that Paul couldn't even think about. And continue to be delivering people from their false gods, false religions. That are not fake, they're actually real, but they're not submitted to God and Christ. And so they're losing religions, essentially. And then eschatologically speaking, we need to work on ourselves in terms of our personal holiness and growth, because God has much more in store for us. That's where this is going. I could just mention this. I think it's 1 Corinthians 6. Judge angels. Yeah. If any of you has a dispute with another, do you dare take it before the ungodly for judgment instead of before the Lord's people? Or do you not know that the Lord's people will judge the world? And if you were to judge the world, are you not competent to judge in trivial cases? Do you not know that we will judge angels? How much more the things of this life? And so I'm going to read 1 Corinthians 6, 1 through 3. This is your personal growth and development. We must, as individuals, get to the point where we are capable of ruling and leading. God is going to have us to judge angels. 1 Corinthians 6, 1 to 3. So this is everything we're trying to do, big picture. Prepare. This is everything we're trying to do, big picture, in the church age, so far as I can understand. Yeah, exactly. Jesse says, capturing the nations that Paul couldn't even fathom has a great tie into our VBS since it highlights the diversity of the nations across the world. That's exactly right. And so I need to make a reference to VBS here. VBS. Going to get all the nations. Got a text here from one of my professors. Oh, nice. He got a good picture of us. I like it. So Paul goes to Spain because it's the end of the world for him. We need to go beyond Paul even. We're capturing all the nations for Christ. We're delivering them from their false gods. And I'll put false in parentheses because they're actually real gods. But they're losing gods, right? Lowercase g gods. We tie that into VBS. And then the gates of hell won't prevail against it. I think that wraps up everything I want to say. All right. I'm digging that. Let's see. Awesome. Okay, guys, I think that's it. Priorities, disciple making, assault, big picture priorities, understanding the big picture of the church age and what we're trying to accomplish, and summarizing with Matthew 16:18. We will not fail. We cannot fail in this process. I think that'll be a good call to action, and I think that'll really encourage and motivate people. Alright guys, I'm going to have to practice this one a few times just to get a good feel for it, and go from there. I like the direction it's headed. I just need to make sure the transitions are clean, but other than that, I'm pleased with where it ends up, and I think it's going to wrap up our whole series on spiritual warfare very, very well. Okay, if you guys don't have anything additional for me, I think I'm going to wrap up. I know I'm wrapping up a little bit early here. What I might do, I might go ahead and wrap up this stream, and then I might just stream for a little bit longer and just do maybe some Q&A or do some little study on different topics. But in terms of this sermon, I think it's wrapped up. It's clean. It's the direction I want to go. And yeah, this is, I think, going to be a good ending to the series we've been on. Anyway, hope you guys have a great Saturday, great rest of your day, and I will talk to you guys later. Take care. Bye now.